We're not here to put up numbers or make things look more acquirable and set expectations that are not reasonable.
I'm super excited here to be with Victor Feria, co-founder and managing director at Tangy Management.
Tangy Management is a hospitality solutions company. So what we do is we basically focus on everything short-term management related. We also do long-term management related. We manage boutique hotels. We're now getting into the glamping sector.
That glamping site that you're developing is going to be the first one, right, in Miami?
100%, yeah. The first glamping site here in all of South Florida.
Question on the model, just because I'm curious, how do you protect yourself? You're looking into alternative accommodation opportunities, right? I think there's something there as far as a trend that you're trying to capitalize on. Why do you think that that is a good strategic move for you guys moving forward?
The idea came about specifically here in South Florida because you can feel remote and you can feel like you're out in the wilderness, but there's none like it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and where we bring together leaders, operators, entrepreneurs, investors, and founders in the space so they can tell us about their stories and the lessons that they have learned along the way, maybe even some of the mistakes that they have learned along the way so we don't have to make those same mistakes ourselves. I'm super excited here to be with Victor Feria, the co-founder and managing director at Tangy Management. Victor, thanks so much for being here. Can you tell us briefly where you're taking the call from, as well as how you're doing today?
I love it, Sebastian. Thank you so much for the intro. And I got to say, a lot more mistakes than there are, positives in that matter. So, but I appreciate that intro, and it's a great one. Thank you for that. But I am speaking to you from beautiful, sunny Miami, Florida. Have you ever been?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Thank you for taking the time, Victor. So tell us briefly about Tangy Management. What is it that you guys do at a high level? And then we're gonna get into the backstory of how you got to where you are today and what you've learned along the way. But yeah, just overview of what Tangy Management is all about.
Of course, yeah. So Tangy Management is a hospitality solutions company. So what we do is we basically focus on everything short-term management related. We also do long-term management related. We manage boutique hotels. We're now getting into the glamping sector, which I know that's a hot topic. And then we also do manage creative spaces. So if you have like a space and you want to host conferences, we could also help and manage that as well. So kind of everything that we do in a nutshell.
Yeah, and to parenthesis, that glamping site that you're developing is going to be the first one, right, in Miami?
100%. Yeah, we just got from Miami-Dade County this Friday. We got the final approval from Miami-Dade County, giving us the ability to basically put together the first glamping site here in all of South Florida. So we're really excited. And I know Miami-Dade County was, gave us our challenges. Obviously, they don't want to open up a can of worms, but we're super proud and excited. And we've been working on it for a year and finally got that piece of paper. So a lot more to come.
That's exciting. And Victor, can you tell us a little bit, about your background in hospitality? I know you come from the hotel world. Tell us a little bit about, how you got into the space.
Of course. Yeah. Well, it all started as a young buck, 16-year-old Victor, first job ever. And, curiously enough, the first job ever was in hospitality. So I played baseball growing up all of my life. And I wanted like a little summer job, like every other 16, 15-year-old, a little summer job that'll pay, for things that I want to buy, a car, a phone, etc. So it was in a hotel here in South Florida. It's called Trump National Doral, where I first started in a driving range, a golf driving range. So if you ever see the commercials or if you ever see the videos of people in the little car picking up the golf balls and people shooting golf balls at them, that was me. And that was my first job. And then funny enough, we fast forward 2 years. Again, I was still playing baseball, but I got, this is probably every baseball player's or every athlete's demise, but I tore my ACL. And basically I couldn't do anything physical, and that job entailed to be physical. So I said, all right, I got to do something different. And I was moved to the front desk. And, I do say that my first hospitality was at the driving range because obviously I serviced people and I was, got my first taste of hospitality. But really, I think the driving range was like my high school, and then the front desk was like my university. And then when I started at front desk, I started moving up through various departments. My goal was to become a general manager and hopefully in 10 years. So by 30, 31. And to my surprise, it ended up being that I was an owner of a company, which I'll take that as well. But I did everything from front of house, back of house. I worked sales. I moved into my current business partner, Steve Turk, had a company where he was operating a staffing company and he needed help. So I started working with him, and that's where I started working with a lot of luxury hotels here in South Florida. I'll name a few like the Lowe's, the Eden Rock, Fontainebleau. We have the Satai. We worked with so many luxury hotels, and that's where I really started, you know, gathering how other old hotels and getting my foot in how they work and operate. And from there, that's when the idea came. 2018, we said, hey, everything that we've learned, all of the process, all of the standards, everything that we've gathered from hotels, how would it do if we bring all of that into short-term rental? So 6 years later, here we are, 45 doors that we currently manage, and we're managing properties from South Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And then I got the opportunity to have these conversations like we are right now, Sebastian. So
That's
it's
exciting. That's exciting. Victor, and tell me something, coming from that hotel background,
yeah,
what do you think that gave you when you first started the vacation rental operation, that
yeah.
you consider it to be an edge, right? Like what is it that you were able to apply and take from that experience and put it in practice in the way that you were building your organization?
Yeah, I love it. Great question. Really, I think where the edge was set specifically from that background was a couple of things. First, I think was the ability to handle a lot at once. Anybody that is listening has worked in hotels in the past, they know the workload. They know,
Mm,
the multitasking and the ability to, go from one guest to service another guest and handle a lot of things at once. That's really where, that was developed and I was able to bring it onto short-term rental. And then also the focus on, guest first and being able to go above and beyond. One of the things that I was able to accomplish while I was working at the hotel is creating the first department for VIP services for the hotel, which is called the attaché department. And that really, helped me think about the guest first and think about the experience overall. In that department, we were looking at every single guest that was checking in and looking up their background and doing a little bit of digging and doing, our Google searches to see who these people are that were coming in and spending so much money. And then we were creating, VIP tiers. So we instill that right now into Tangy, where we're able to look at all the guests that are coming in, even if it's for a wedding or even if they didn't mention they're the CEO of, Carnival, for example. We are able to find that information and create an experience and set up, amenities and things of that nature. So the ability to multitask and the ability to, think about the guest experience as a whole, I think was what I was able to bring in to Tangy Management.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, we talk a lot about unreasonable hospitality these days, and everyone, seems to have enjoyed the book, which is very good. But do you think that this is something that everyone can do, or do you need to, be looking at luxury inventory, in order to be able to afford this? Because it's nice in theory to say, "Oh, I'll go
Great.
above and beyond, and
Of course.
I'll customize each stay, and I'll do all this additional background search to see who the guest is, and what they're looking to get out of this experience." But like, is that doable when you're renting something more, more of a commodity type,
Of course.
property, or is it, do you think, exclusive to luxury?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think really it just goes back to the experience, right? I mean, and that's what we've seen more and more. I recall 2018, 2019, before COVID, where an owner could come to us and say, "Hey, look, I have this, you know, middle to high luxury property, nothing special about it. They want to spend, maybe 10, $15,000 in furnishing. Again, mid-tier furnishing." And we would put that property up and put it together and it would shine, it would do great. And the owners would see, the return of investment. We would see, a great return as well. And it worked. It worked. But
Mhm.
quickly after COVID and after 21 and everybody saw that surge of travelers, we quickly saw 2022, 2023, that those properties that, had spent minimal, you know, minimal finance to put this property together weren't doing as well as those properties that, had the full experience package, like the pools, the little putt-putt in the back, the little chess boards and chess game. I think more and more now guests are looking for experience, and that's where the change has come. They're not just coming in to stay. They want to be themselves in the property with their family, enjoying all of these things that you've set up for them. We have a saying within the company that we always say, and we tell our owners, you spend IKEA money, you get IKEA rates. So nothing on IKEA. IKEA has great, great pieces and beautiful furniture, and we still, will grab a couple of pieces from there. But that's the reality and what we've seen. And I think any class, luxury, middle, or lower could, put that guest hat on and try to find what that experience is for their property that fits their property. Doesn't always have to be again a pool or anything like that, but creating, an atmosphere, creating an experience and setting that local feel. We're setting up right now a property. One property comes to mind in South Carolina, our first property that we've invested within Tangy Management, and we've had full control of what is going on in the property right now. We're on the finishing touches. And since it's in South Carolina and Charleston, we want to bring that Charleston feel, right? That local feel. So we're shopping around, grabbing little knickknacks, grabbing guidebooks, grabbing and trying to create that Charleston experience. So when guests get there, they feel that, that hospitality.
So it's not so much, it's not so much an option. Like it's kind of like you either do it or you stay behind. And have you found that guests are becoming also more difficult, and not only expectation wise, but also like in terms of, what they require on site, and how much communication, they require? Like, have you seen a trend over the last few years where sort of that guest experience component is becoming more and more challenging?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I see a big change, from when we started in 2018, we noticed that there was still a lot of coaching that we had to do with guests. We saw that there was a lot of guests checking in, getting upset, like, "Hey, why did my house or my property get, turned down? Why didn't the maid come in to service my property?" Hey, so we saw a lot of people still not understanding what, short-term rental or what Airbnb was all about. And now we're seeing that the information is out and people are more familiar with what short-term rental. So I think their expectation has met that. Before it was hard because they were thinking, everything like a hotel. They've only been in hotels. Now going into short-term rental, they're expecting that same, caliber. And we've seen that change happen gradually, that it's not like that anymore with guests. But there are, obviously expectations, because if you go out there and you look at Airbnbs, in any and every market, there's really a lot of people doing it correctly. A lot of people correctly. So therefore there's more competition and therefore there's more expectations created. Hey, we stayed at an Airbnb 2 months ago, and the owner had, a full refrigerator waiting for us, full of food and items and water and this and that. You know, we see that this is not the case here. So we'll still see that a little bit. We're obviously from the hotel world. We're always trained, and it's like kind of embedded in us to always go above and beyond and never say no to a guest. So if that's
Mhm.
their expectations, we don't simply just shut it down. We find alternatives. So we'll say, "Hey, yeah, you walked in, it's, maybe you found a couple of water bottles and bottle, not the whole fruits and, staging that you got from your previous Airbnb. We do have, Roombox, a great company that we work with and partner with, that we can go order, all those fruits and vegetables and things that you were expecting and have it delivered to your house." So we always look for an alternative and find a way to go above and beyond and not just flat out say no to a guest. I think that's really
Mhm.
important.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned like the growing competition, right? And I think that's a common theme as well.
Very
The session of the market, and supply facing demand in some cases. And so, what are your thoughts on dealing and navigating through that, specifically in a market, like Miami, where there's so much inventory that's coming into the market continuously? First, let's talk about it on the owner's side. Like,
Mhm.
do you have owners that bought at a peak and that have seen a decline, where you're having to justify, hey, we're still doing better because we're doing it, then drop, but like what you saw in previous years is no longer what you expect? Or
Right.
or how are you navigating that from a owner relations and owner communications perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned it now recently, coaching the guests and kind of setting expectations is also something that we do for our owners and we practice it. But anybody listen, I challenge you, go home, if you have an Airbnb, if you have a property, go home and just look at all of the superhost or the guest favorite properties around you and you'll see the level, of competition that is out there. To your question here specifically in Miami, we're seeing something extremely unique where there's about 60,000, 50 to 60,000 units right now being built in all of downtown. These huge luxury buildings that are being built downtown and are going to add all of this inventory. And that's going to be a lot of one bedrooms, one bathrooms, a lot of studio rooms. So we're foreseeing that. And we are working with investors and owners saying, hey, the competition for one bedroom, one bathroom is going to get a lot more challenging. Not only if you
Mhm.
do have one bedroom, one bathroom, or you bought in a condo, are you going to be competing with those properties, but you're also going to be competing with hotels. So try to, with our owners, to find the best investment for them with the current market. So that's something really big that we've done here. And to our current clients, to our current owners that have properties, we sit down with them and we show them, our personal properties that we manage. And we say, hey, look, you know, this is your these are your numbers. This is what a property like, a superhost or a guest favorite property that is all, decked out with guest experience in mind and then great photos and great staging. And we'll show them the numbers to compare. And we'll say, as an owner need to make a decision. It's not my funds and my money. But if you want to see, your return increase, we got to think about, the overall experience and we got to look at all of these other competitors that are coming up more and more. So that's a homework and an activity we do very frequently with our owners, and that's something that's probably like the best tip or advice that I can give for someone who's either trying to start out or maybe not seeing, the best numbers for the property. But as an investor, I always say we want to always be sure that if we're buying a property that it can do well on short-term rental as a plan A, and then it could also do well long-term as a plan B. We're able to manage both of those, and we've actually created like a whole model based on that we call it our hybrid model. So it's super neat, and we've kind of grown and expanded and forecasted what's to come, and we mold and change as every company should do around happening in the market. So that's
Yeah.
from the owner and client perspective.
And there's two things I wanna dig deeper into there. One is we'll come back to it, the hybrid model, because I hear a lot about flex leasing these days. Want to
Yeah,
discuss the challenges of putting that in place. But when it comes to the competition and whatnot, you mentioned like thousands of units coming to the market, where all of a sudden maybe a one bedroom, a studio property doesn't become as attractive
right.
as as an asset class. Like what's the take there? Like is it, hey, like no longer we should no longer invest in studios and what bedrooms, like commodity type properties
Yeah,
are just not part of where you see opportunities in the future, like invest in more experienced type properties, maybe for larger groups, things like that. Like is that one conclusion that you would say, like for investors out there, like with so much you know of that coming into the market, like
yeah.
just focus elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a great point, Sebastian, and I don't think necessarily that all one bedrooms with bathrooms are just going to be a dud. We always emphasize to owners, especially if they're coming to us to help manage, one of these units. We want to always emphasize, doing your research, making sure that you are going on to these platforms that are available like Airbnb. You're doing your market research and making sure that if you are going to invest in one of these, because you want this for your own personal use. A lot of our clients, have or own these properties or buy these properties because they like to travel and use it themselves. So completely understandable. But if you are going that route, we want to make sure that you're standing out, right? That you're setting
Mhm.
yourself out of the pack. So what can that be like? A couple of tips would be, create a branding for your unit. Don't just, hey, one bedroom, one bathroom, maybe create a little logo, create some marketing, some branding behind it, that when the guests arrive to the property, they'll have napkins with your unique logo of your unit. Create little details and little touches that really set yourself apart. So I think it's just do your homework, do your research, contact several management companies. A lot of these management companies like ours provide free property analysis. So we do that for every one of our clients. So try 3 or 4 management companies who have good experience and possibly manage these units already, and see what they think and see what they say. Get us, general consensus to see if this is the right investment. What we're seeing now more and more, and I want everybody to be very cautious. I'm not sure if this is happening all throughout the country, but it is something specific here in Miami, that a lot of these brokers and realtors and companies that are representing these buildings and selling these buildings are, trying to inflate the investment a little bit to make it more, make it more acquirable, make it more, of marketable in that component, to get more sellers, because the name of the game for them is to be able to sell. So they want more buyers, sorry, into it. So we see this time and time again. I won't share names, but we had an instance where a company that was representing a building that was being built for short-term rentals brought us in and sat down with us and said, "Hey, we want to partner with you. We want you to manage, these 200 units, and we need your help." Absolutely, 100%. Hey, first thing we need from you is to help us, you know, put together an analysis for each unit or for all the specific units so we can share with our client and our buyers, potential buyers. We put that together. We sent that in. The numbers weren't exactly what they were expecting or what they were wanting. And they straightforward told us, "Hey, we can't work with you if, these are the numbers that you're going to be sharing to our buyers. We need those numbers, to be a little emphasized." And we flat out said, "Look, we're not in that business. We're not, here to put up numbers or make things look more acquirable and set expectations that are not reasonable. And therefore, we're not able to partner up. And that's not specifically what we do." But this happened to us. So I could imagine this can happen to, to other companies. But I don't want to get too deep in that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but it's a good point. Like, all right, they want to sell those units, so of course, they want to show good returns. But who's gonna set up? Who's gonna deal with the expectation of the owner not being met afterwards? It's you, right? So definitely important to make sure that you're communicating those expectations properly from the get go if you're dealing with owners. Now, at the same time, I also see you going back to the project you're working on
Yeah.
in terms of glamping.
Hmm.
Like you're looking into alternative accommodation opportunities, right? So I think there's something there as far as like a trend that you're trying to capitalize on. So tell us more about how that came about and why do you think that that is a good strategic move for you guys moving forward?
Of course. Yeah. It's a great question, Sebastian. I mean, first, obviously, the cost of producing or putting one of these together as opposed to, buying a property, especially with the rates and interest rates that are right now. But the idea came about specifically here in South Florida because one, there's none like it. And secondly, there is an area here in South Florida where you can feel remote and you could feel like you're out in the wilderness, but you're still not too far away from all of the, what Miami has to offer. You're basically a 30-40 minute drive to certain locations. And we thought and we think that, that is something unique because a lot of the glamping sites that I'm seeing are out, in kind of in a remote area where really all you have is really, just to be in there and you eat, sleep, stay, and do everything in there. But we thought and we saw a unique opportunity in a market where you can have that and then as well still be able to, explore all of what the city and Miami has to offer. So that's where we found the uniqueness to it. And also here specific to South Florida, the farming industry, as I'm sure most in the country are not as strong as they used to be. Here specifically in South Florida, a lot of farmers were given the ability now to set up storefronts, something that's never been able to be done here in South Florida. And they're able to set up storefronts where they can, set up a restaurant or set up an attraction to attract more people and have another stream of revenue instead of just, the farming, the basic farming. And they could use their produce and they could use and promote their food and their cultivation in the restaurant. So that was, very unique to our area. And first off, with the farmer itself, the person who owns this land, this 40 acres of land, they're all towards it and they're all for it. And what we want to do and what we want to incorporate is we still want to incorporate all of the farm and all of the agricultural component to the farming. So it's not that you're just going to stay at a glamping site and you're going to sleep there. You're going to get to go to Miami Beach and come back and sleep there. No, we're going to develop, partnerships with other farms. We're going to set up packages where we can have, fruit package. Hey, do you want, fruits prior to your arrival? And we can get, local fruits or the fruits that we grow there and set up little packages. So it's still in the works. We don't have everything 100% in the plans, but there's just so much opportunity and it's so different and it's a challenge. So, and I like a challenge, and I think we also like a challenge and a new project and a new vision. So we're extremely excited about it. I can't wait
Oh,
to.
it's exciting.
And we would love for you to stay in one.
Yeah, no, that'd be amazing. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to. I'm curious to know about the model. Is it all land ownership there that you're basically acquiring and then putting the glamping on, or are you kind of renting someone else's land or giving them a revenue split in exchange for them letting you use their land? Like, what's the model you guys have thought out there?
Yeah, so it's definitely the second option. So we have a farmer again, that is struggling, not necessarily, getting the return that they wish for in that specific land. So they're looking for other creative opportunities to create more revenue and generate a stream. And basically, we developed a partnership with her that is a percentage based off of the nightly rate. So that way, there's a incentive for the farmer, obviously to make sure that the land is always kept up and everything is in order. And then also they could, reap the benefits of our project and be able to share those winnings with the owner. There's many, many ways that you can develop a relationship. Like you just mentioned, you could buy the land and so many different components. But this one specifically, this was something that worked for that owner. And we like that percentage share split model because again, it incentivizes both the owner and us to, bring the best tier, the best level of service orders because we both.
And in your case, are you having to put the cost up front for the infrastructure that has to be put in place? I guess that's where you come in and have to upfront all of that.
Correct, correct. Yeah. So we're currently right now first working with an engineer as we got the approval. We got now to build everything out and get that approved as well. And then secondly, it would be the funding, right? It's always the fun part. We've never, at least me personally, I've never had to deal with the funding. My business partner has. So I know that he has good experience and I'm gonna, focus on his experience on that to help that. But that is, one of the next step and in the funding part. So it'll be a little bit of investors and it'll be a little bit of Tangy money as well.
Mhm.
To help produce this.
And also last question on the model, just because I'm curious, how do you protect yourself? Like, is the contract done for like a certain period of time, like 5 years or so that you don't end up putting all the infrastructure in place and then the owner of the land tells you, sorry, but I want to continue farming?
Well, far. I agree. I agree. Yeah, it's a great question. It's something definitely we've thought about. But first to start, the one of the details in us developing this, glamping site was that it can't be a fixed structure. So we thought at first, oh, hey, this might be a detriment, if it can't be a fixed structure, what are we going to get or what are we going to put? And we found a lot of companies that actually produce and develop, structures that are not fixed. The reason why the city wanted it is just in case a hurricane or something that happens, here, and we were talking about it earlier before we started about hurricanes, and it's a big deal here in South Florida. They want to know that these pieces of, wood and tents are not just going to be flying around. So they wanted to make sure that they're not fixed structures. We thought it was a negative, but we actually, after thinking about it and planning a little bit more, we now find it as a positive because for, the instance that you just mentioned, if the owner decides to sell that glamping site, we could just take everything and move it somewhere else, right? So that is
And wait, the regulators wanted it to be fixed, is what
the
they're saying.
regulators. Yeah, the Miami-Dade County, they did not want it to be a fixed structure, so they didn't want it.
Did not want.
Yeah,
Okay, so just so that if there's a hurricane or something, you can. I would have thought that there's more risk of it flying around if it's not fixed, because if it's fixed, at least
yeah, because if it's not
you
fixed,
can
basically
stay
we can bring in a bunch of trucks, we can move it all out, we can rent
right the hurricane coming.
hurricane, we can store all of those glamping sites in a hangar, in a large hangar, let the hurricane pass, and then bring it back.
Okay.
the ocean. That was their point, and I think it worked out. We found a lot of, there's just this glamping world is just growing so much, so much. There's actually a conference, I believe it's like in the end of December or mid-December, I'm sorry, that it's like a show just for glamping and tents
Really? Where is it?
up going. I forget where it is. I know it's a little bit in the mid of country. I have to do my research. I probably should.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no, I'm curious. I'm
But
curious.
yeah, it's basically a big piece of land and a conference that everybody goes out from the world and they model all of the different types of tents, and there's just so much now, so many developers and so many engineers working on creating unique spaces that there's so many options now that we didn't even know. And after doing so much research, we've become experts at it, but there's a lot of opportunity.
I wanted to ask you also, going back to the conversation about the inventory that's coming onto the market in Miami, and how much competition there is and whatnot. There's something very important that you mentioned there, which is that these properties, these units that are coming onto the market, will also be competing with hotels. And I remember you mentioning as well that part of your revenue management methodology considers data sources from from hotels in general. So can you tell us a little bit about the importance of, I feel like a lot of vacation rental operators do not necessarily use hotel market data sources.
Yeah.
And you were also saying how sometimes, when you look at the data from the hotel side, you're seeing like the trend that's going to hit the vacation rental industry maybe in a few months. So you're kind of looking at the future, so to speak. So what's your philosophy around how you can incorporate hotel market data into revenue management for vacation rentals?
Yeah, super important. I mean, and I think that came from, again, us having that background in hotels and knowing how, revenue, work for hotels and forecasting and, RevPARs and things of that nature. And we, really focused on it. And it's been something that we've been working for some time because, we didn't want to just put all our eggs in one basket and say, hey, hotels follow very similar. We were looking and doing our research with time and seeing that there is a lot of correlation between hotel, markets and demand with us as well. With vacation rental as well. Like I mentioned to you before we started and you asked me about the hurricane specifically, we noticed that obviously, the hurricane was going through the West Coast. And we started quickly, getting phone calls, or we started making phone calls to other hotels that we have been, friendly with and we have communication and contact with. And we were asking them, hey, this is going on. What are you guys seeing? He's like, hey, our properties, our units are getting filled up. We're getting a lot of people now that are making reservations, and we see this, trend. It looks like we're gonna be filled up for that week. And surely enough, a couple days after, we started filling up. So we had, it's terrible to say that obviously the west coast of Florida, my heart goes out to everyone that, were impacted, but in a way we benefited because all the people evacuating from the west coast came down to us. And that was a trend that we correlated and was very, very in correlation with the hotels. So that gave us, the sign that not only should we be looking at other short-term rentals in the market, but we should also, consider hotels as well. We can see it, this year, September has been the slowest. And we know this September is always the slowest of the year. This one was historically one of the lowest. And we were, already in March, April, and high demand months. We're already hearing from our, hotels, and we're already seeing data from hotels that September is going to be one of the most historically low months. And that proved to be the point. And what did that help us do as a company? First, all of our expenses and all of our revenues, and we're able to look and focus at our P&L and set up a plan for that month. And then secondly, we were able to communicate with our owners and, build that expectations to them and letting them know, hey, historically, September is going
Mhm.
to be the slowest month of the year. You know, let's make sure we focus on, saving all these great months that we've had and all this revenue that we've created. Let's go ahead and, use all that up, and let's save that because September is going to be kind of like a survival month. And surely, September happened, one of the slowest. All of our owners were educated. We were ready. And now coming on October on, we are, on the other side of that slow month, and we're starting to see everything pick back up as we had predicted. So right now, October 29th, when we're filming this, we're looking at already, January, February, and March, and, setting up plans for those months with what we're seeing now from hotels, and then also historic data from our short-term rentals.
Mhm. And what's different about data sources that are hotel specific that allows them to be more forward looking than vacation rental market data sources?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the data from hotels, I mean, can paint a lot of pictures, right? I think the differentiator in theirs is the the time of booking, right? Us for short term rental, I'm sure certain is probably something you see also within your market, Sebastian, but we see that the average lead time is a lot shorter for short term rental versus a hotel. So a
Mhm,
hotel could already see, December and January, they have a pretty good solid foundation versus short-term rental, where maybe that's necessarily not the case.
mm,
Here in Miami, specific to our market, we see more of the average lead time for short-term rentals be about, 30 to 45 days. For
mm,
hotels, specifically here in Miami and South Florida, it runs a little longer than that. So we're able to use that data and not, freak out our owners or us freak out ourselves internally and say, hey, we're seeing strong numbers in the hotels and they're already booking 3, 4, 5 months, even 6 months out. And they're already looking at strong numbers for those months. So we can expect similar. So I think that's a big
mhm.
differentiator.
And do you look at hotel market data more on a macro level, or are you also going in and building comps that are hotel comps, but for your
Yeah.
vacation rental units?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so we have internally, we have Tuesdays and Thursdays where our revenue management team meets every Tuesday and Thursday. And we're going through every individual unit and comparing them to the market, to local competitors, and then hotels. So those are the 2 days where we're looking and analyzing all that information. Daily, we're making changes to our rates. Daily, we're looking at as a broader, like on a broader spectrum. But those days are so important to us. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, those revenue management meetings are extremely important because everybody can focus on what the goal and what the expectation is in mind. And that's how we kind of seen works for us. Everything is different for everyone, and maybe that doesn't work for everybody, but that is something that we see that has worked and been a big positive light for our company.
Mhm. Yeah, and in terms of differences of doing revenue management with hotels versus vacation rentals,
Mhm.
I can think of like the inventory, the way it's distributed, like hotels being
Yep.
more like by the type or the category versus vacation rentals more by the unit. Is that something, for example, that you've used in the vacation rental side as far as doing revenue management with things that you learn from the hotel world, or and what other examples can you
Yeah.
think of?
Yeah, it's been definitely different, just because like you mentioned, again, hotels with one bedrooms and studios, very different from, homes that we currently manage, 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes. So they're, in a sense, they're two different categories, but it's something that we've kind of learned along the way, and we've used that hotel data to kind of support what we've been doing. It's not something that we just picked up and learned. It's been something that we've worked throughout time, right? It's been years of us looking at all this information and building history and looking back and able to produce all of this to help us really understand what's going on and what makes sense. Because a 3, 4, 5 bedroom home, will probably market very differently and will probably book very differently as opposed to a 1 bedroom, a 1 bathroom studio or 1 bathroom hotel room. So that's been like the learning curve and figuring out how much of a correlation will those two make sense with each other. But still progress, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's always work in progress for sure, right? Yeah, revenue management is always work in progress.
Sure.
Now, tell me something in terms of you personally, like where you spend most of your time and how that has evolved since you started Tangy
Yeah.
Management. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure, like a lot of, vacation rental operators and yourself, Sebastian, I'm sure when you first started, you're wearing a lot of hats, right? You were, kind of what we talked about in the beginning of the show, and that's where you get that from the hotel, where you wear a lot of hats. You are, the runner, you are the houseman, you are the housekeeper, you are the accountant, you are the marketing personnel. So that has developed and changed a lot. I'm always a firm believer that if you can hire someone that is better at you than something, that's a good hire. That's a perfect person to have in that company because we're all human. We're not perfect. And the goal is to find that person that you can bring in and immediately create a value because that person, those strengths for that person is exactly perfect for that position in itself. One book, which I think I mentioned to you, that really kind of started and made that change for me because the first 2 years of starting Tangy Management from 2016 to 20, I'm sorry, from 2018 to 2020 were just us running around and, kind of surviving. And that switch was made when I discovered one of my friends recommended a book called Traction. Traction, basically, it's a book that helps you understand your company, not by all of these processes or all of these different departments. They help you kind of, you know, put everything in pieces and create processes around those pieces. So it's not all of these elements, it's just, 5 or 6 elements, and you can, compress everything with that. We also hired an EOS personnel. Her name is Isabel. She's amazing that we've had the pleasure of working with her now for about 2, 3 years now. And she has been able to hone down all of this for our company. So immediately, we started developing our L10 meetings. So what is an L10 meeting is we have it once a week with our leadership team. And basically we have a scorecard and we have our rocks. Rocks are also basically goals that we have to accomplish in 3 months. Scorecard is basically the thinking behind it is, let's say if, myself and my business partner get stranded on an island and we have no electronics, we have no phone, we have no laptop, and somebody can come once a week to the island and give us a sheet of numbers that will tell us what the health of our company is. And that's the idea with that scorecard. So we're looking at, reviews, we're looking at, revenue, we're looking at occupancy, and those are very important numbers to us that can tell us weekly what the health of our company is.
Is it like a score? The scorecard, is it like 1 to 10, 1 to 5, or is it like red, yellow, green? Like what how do you guys use that
Yeah,
specifically?
yeah, it's many, many components. Like we have like a guest complaint component. So we say, hey team, we want to get the guest complaint to 2 or less under, in a week. As well for our communications team, our virtual assistant team, we want to answer all messages within a 5-minute range or less. So we're looking at that weekly and we're seeing how much of their, how quickly we're answering and how accurately we're answering to guests. Also, we want to see our views, seeing if our website is working properly and people are going in. So we want to make sure if we set a goal, we want like, just to give you an example, 500 views or more into our website. So we see that every week and we're able to see, all right, why did this week, we were so low, or why was this week we were so high in views. One example right now, because we just did our L10 not too long ago around 10 a.m. this morning. And last week we had a big conference that we were exhibiting in. And we shot up to like 1,000 something page views in 1 week. And we were able to see, all right, why was that? Because people were walking by our booth. They were checking out Tangy Management. We saw a huge spike, almost like a 40-30% spike. We had our tablet there, showing our website, and we noticed that, hey, that was the reason why. So we're able to not only, plan and also see historical data, but we're also able to see what the health of the company is. And that's a really big component and something that has drastically changed. So I joke sometimes with my wife when I finish the day, and I'll tell her, today I was an owner of a company. Because why? Because I was able to look at data, I was able to look at rates, I was able to forecast, I was able to plan. But like any other owner and any other operator, there are days that you're a manager. And that day it was really busy. We had tons of check-ins and checkouts, and we had to step in. We're still predominantly a smaller team. So, but we still wear many hats, but in a different kind of, day to day, to that sense. But I love that.
What do you think is the hardest part of going from being a manager to being an owner? And how do you
Very
go
much.
through that?
I think to me is the team. I've always been a team-oriented person. I played baseball all my life. So I see everyone almost like a baseball team, right? If you know a little bit about baseball, your first batter is always the quickest batter. You know, the third or the fourth are your power hitters, because if you got the first batter on base, your third batter is coming in and hopefully hitting a home run. So I see it in that sense, and strategically bringing on people and team members that are placed in right places so we can hit that home run, right? And that's been the biggest challenge as a leader and as growing your company, because there's really no fine print, for what we're doing. In hotels, it's been, something that's been around for many, many years. You can, find an amazing managed property, and you can grab what they do and instill it in your hotel and it'll work. Here, vacation rental, it's not that. It's not, as simple as that. What works for you may not work for me, and what work for you. And that's been really the biggest challenge, is the person and finding what works for us as we grow.
Yeah, and yeah, and I hear people, sometimes being stuck in that phase of being
Yeah.
a manager or, an employee, right, at their own business. And I think it's fear of letting go and fear of delegating that prevents them from being able to step back and become an owner.
Mhm.
Um, what helped you in that process, right? Was it just, making sure you had the right people, like you were saying? Like, was it even challenging for you to let go of certain functions, or no, I just came natural?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's, especially when something that you built with your own hands, you kind of have that emotional component attached to it, especially that, you know yourself, if you want to get something done, you do it, and you know how you're going to do it. Really, that was a challenge, of just kind of letting go and letting the reins, but it was a learning process for me in that component. And we wanted to make sure that first, all of our systems were intact, that all the information and all of the software we use is easy and friendly to use. And it's also something that I could quickly, just go in and see what's going on. And that'll give me a peace of mind. So we use Slack to be able to communicate internally as a team. And anything that goes on operationally, I could quickly go in and see. And then another one that's also a change for me is being able to work through people. Before, I would say, hey, this is going to take me 5 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and complete this because it's a task I've done many, many, many times. But that 5 minutes is taking you away from being able to do more important things. Right. So I've learned to, more than anything, work through people. So I've been able to say, all right, this is a task that take me 5, 10, 15 minutes. I don't think it's the most convenient or the best use of my time right now. I think this is something that I know this person will complete, will get done even better than I will. So that's where I see it. So a lot of my day, I'm looking back and I'm saying, oh, I'm doing this a lot of times, or I'm doing this maybe not wrong, or I'm sorry, wrong. I could change this, or I could give this or pass this on to somebody else to free up my time to be able to do what's important for the growth of the company. It's a mental change that you really need to do as a business owner.
And so how do you decide what's important?
Oh yeah, that's another good one. So it's, to me, if it's not something that is helping the company, so if it's not, I ask myself the question, if I'm not working on the business, then I'm working in the business. So anything that it's me working in the business, that's something that I want to gate and I want to work through somebody. If I'm working on the business, so those are things like, developing relationships. Those are things of like planning. Those are things of like, with our marketing team. Those are things that I know will be, have me working on the business. And that sets that apart. And I know specifically, are more important for our time. So that's how I'm able to decipher that. That's a great question as well.
Makes sense. And in terms of, just overall your approach to leadership, tell me what's important in terms of that culture building, right? Because you mentioned you guys are also huge on building that internal culture. So
Yeah,
how have you guys gone about developing that in practice?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think the first step was, knowing what our values are as a company. And this is something that, the book Traction and EOS talks a lot about and helped us develop. And what are the values? What are like our, our, uh, things that we can hire from, our values that we can hire from, and then values that we can fire from. So what are those to us? Is, everybody, being transparent. We want everybody to be, communicated and being transparent to each other and to guests and to owners, because that's really important to us. We want to make sure that we're open. We're always developing, we're moving as a company, and we want everybody to be open to new challenges and new opportunities. We want everyone to have grit. This is something that we did in hospitality and hotel world, is you need to have that grit and that perseverance, right? Like guests, we'll have moments that a guest will complain about the smallest thing. And I know that could get irritating, but we need to have grit to show perseverance and go forth and do whatever it takes to get the company, ahead. And really, I could go on and on about our values. We have 5 of those, but it's really getting that team and everybody to kind of row all in the same direction. And that's something that doesn't happen, you know, night and day. This is something that you need to work on daily, 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 daily with your team, because any standard or anything that changes out of your standard or out of your process, that becomes the new standard and the new process, right? So you need to stay diligent and work, every day on it, and have that team with that same value and that same vision behind what you're doing. And I think that's really where you could take it to the next level. It's not easy. I'm sure over here somebody's listening and hearing me talk about this, but it's something that you just need to work on daily.
Yeah, it takes time. And last thing I want to discuss with you is branding, right? Because you guys seem to have a very unique brand, and I'm
Thank you.
curious to know if your vision for it is more so like trying to build a guest facing brand, an owner facing brand, both. Just overall, like what's the vision for your brand and the role that you think that branding can have in the success of building a management operation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so important, right? I mean, yeah, when we were doing the preliminary kind of research and we're doing, all of our findings for what we want the company to be, what it wants we want it to stand for, what the logo and what the look and everything to be. It was a really important process, and we really wanted to, when we first started thinking of the name and the logo and things of that nature, we were thinking first something that fits. We're here in Miami and Florida. Florida fruit is the orange. Orange is our fruit of for the state, and we wanted to base off of that color. And then we also wanted, again, keeping with a lot of companies that are really successful, like Apple, Microsoft. All of these companies are one word, company. So we wanted something that as soon as you said it, thingy, it takes you somewhere, it takes you to a feeling, a color, a look. And that's what we were trying to get to. And we got to that word tangy, because tangy, not only develops a feeling, it also develops a taste. You could feel, you could smell, you could hear a tangy. And that's kind of where, we first initially started. And then after that, from our hotel world and hotel experience, if you go to a hotel website, first thing you see on the branding, I'm sure, is people in the pool, people enjoying their time in the property, people hanging out in the cabana. So we wanted to bring also that lifestyle feel to Tangy. So if you go on our website, you'll see we have little logos, little fruits, little umbrellas, little things, and all match and kind of culminate to that one specific vision. But it's something not easy, and it's something that changes over time. Like, we just recently developed and put out our new website, because we actually had Tangy Management. We were thinking, hey, we have Tangy Management where it's owner facing, and an owner can find us and know what we're all about. And we have other websites, staywithtangy.com, where a guest can find us and book the property with us. But after doing a lot of research and speaking with a lot of people, we were convinced, and we were, focused, and now bringing everything together. That way we don't have to focus on 2 individual websites. We only focus on one. And somebody said to me a really good analogy that made that click for me. And it was like, let's say I have a product, or I own a product, and I want to sell that product in a market. And I go to Target and I say, hey, Target, I want you to sell, my product. It could be anything. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk into Target, and I'm going to see how, each product is displayed, or how each product is being sold in that specific store. So that brought me back right into what we're doing. As an owner, you want to go into that website and you want to see other properties that you manage. You want to see how you're displaying and how you're promoting other people's properties. So that gave us the conclusion, like, yeah, let's, uniform, and let's bring it all together and tie it up. And now we could focus on one individual website, and we could bring owners into our website, and then guests as well to book directly with us. So now we can get everything in our basket.
Yeah, that's interesting because I also hear people saying, "Oh, well, maybe it's best to have it separated." Some other
Right.
people want to carry combined, and I can see the logic for having it separated in the sense that
Yeah.
you're driving the visitor through a particular experience that's aligned with what they're looking for. Like if you're looking to rent a property, that's all you see. If you're looking for management services,
Yeah.
that's all you see. Whereas if you have both, it can get confusing. So how did you guys structure this website in a way that would would still serve both? Like, is there any takeaways from the process you just went through as far as researching the best way to put this in place?
Of course, yeah. And I mean, and we made that when we were working with our web developer, we made that really clear. We wanted for there to be a distinction where everyone knows, we're not just a booking engine because I didn't want to get caught just being a booking engine. So we did a lot of research. We looked at the top websites. We looked at Wander. We looked at Vacasa. We looked at One Fine Stay. Some of these companies that have, and they're the biggest companies. Vacasa, obviously, we know is one of the biggest management companies with hundreds and hundreds of doors under their portfolio. So we said, hey, let's try to make sure that when people come to the website, there is components on there that they know that they can, list with us, that they can have our management services be something that we offer, and it doesn't look like it's a booking channel. We don't want to be a booking channel. So that was a challenge, and there was a lot of tweaking and a lot of changes. But really, it's just kind of having that vision and working with people who have done this time and time again, and finding the right people to help you create that. So now if you go onto our website, you'll see there's a little sticky on the top that has all of our company information, list with us, schedule a call with us, about us. Here's our podcast. Here's what we're talking about. We're also members of an association here in Florida, VABR, Florida Association for Vacation Rentals. We wanted to show that to let people know that we are, committed and we are a presence here in Florida. So we have all of those components to ensure that when a client or an owner is looking for us, they know we're not just a booking channel. We could also manage their property. So,
And why do you think that vacation rental companies have failed at building a nation level brand or international brand? Like, from a guest facing perspective, seems like no one has been able to do it at the
yeah,
level that hotels have been able to do it.
right. Right. Yeah. I think, where a lot of these companies, I think, get in trouble is their business model. One, we've known and, we've know companies like Stay Alfred, great companies that do these different arbitrage models that maybe necessarily don't work for them. I think that's one component. Secondly, is that they lose that owner component, right? Because when we're looking at Tangy Management, we're looking at the entire experience. It doesn't just stop with the guest. We also want to know the people who are entrusting in us, the owners, have something in place that they feel comfortable, that they could see live data all the
Mhm.
time, that they know who to communicate with. And I think that's what a lot of big companies are losing, is that component of the owner satisfaction part. We got a lot of owners coming from these major companies coming into us, wanting to feel or get that, more personal experience. So I think that's where a lot of these companies probably can do better. And that's what we're focusing on to make sure we don't make those same mistakes.
Mhm. No, that's amazing. So just to wrap it up, Victor, where can people stay in touch, follow along, listen to your podcast as well?
Yeah.
Stay connected.
Thank you, Sebastian. Yeah, so I'm big on LinkedIn. So I know that's where grown-ups do business. And so you can find me on LinkedIn and add me. And we also have a podcast, like you mentioned, Tangy Talks, where we're talking about, not just necessarily short term, but everything vast. And we're doing that every week. We have our website, our new developed website, which is tangymgmt.com. We're on YouTube as well. We're on Spotify. And yeah, would love to chat with anyone who's interested and took something from this. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity for being able to have this platform and share it with you, Sebastian. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time as well, Victor. It was really insightful, really fun. And yeah, I hope we'll see each other soon. And yeah, I'd love to stay at your glamping site once it's ready. All right, have a good one.